Hi, Glenn here. I've got a couple of projects in the works. The videos are in the process of being recorded and they'll be out in due course. But in the meantime, I hope you'll indulge me. And by the way, this is going to be a talking video. I know some people don't like videos where there's lots of talking, and this might not be for you. But I hope you'll indulge me in sharing some thoughts in the meantime. I'm not generally someone who likes what we might call corporate workshops, when you work in an office and then management gets some consultant to come in and talk to you in groups to make you feel good and profound about things like blue sky thinking, or they'll be promoting a book about the habits of highly successful people and so on, even though I'm about to somewhat contradict that disdain now. There was a meeting at a job that I had some years ago. This meeting might have been, I don't know, 2018 possibly. I'm just guessing, somewhere around that period in history, where we were in a meeting and the facilitator asked us to think about and to come up with, they didn't tell us, they asked us to come up with what we thought of as the habits of effective people. And I thought about that, and maybe I tended to overthink things, but I thought, I can't really answer that unless I know a lot of effective people and also know enough about their lives so that I can pick out the habits that have contributed to their effectiveness. And I just don't think I do. So what I'll do instead is I could think about myself when I think, in my estimation, I've been most effective. So habits that I thought had made me effective and would likely continue to make me effective if I would only practice them. And I was prompted to think of this just recently because this year, 2024, I've made a number of changes to my life, changes for the better, I hope. And one of them is in terms of productivity. And part of that is actually finally getting this channel together and maintaining its output in terms of content. But there have been some other changes as well in terms of mental and physical health and in terms of my study. And so that just got me thinking, okay, what sorts of habits am I actually making use of here? And that reminded me of this exercise. I took notes at the time. This was some years ago now. I hope you don't mind me referring to these because I will do. There are 8 habits that I came up with. I think our lists should be short, otherwise we're not really hitting the important things. We're just hitting everything that comes into our head. Here we go. Firstly, and this isn't so much a habit, something you do from time to time or often. It's kind of more of an all the time constant thing, but I included it anyway because I thought it was important, and it is know what your basic commitments are. And I don't mean surface level things like be kind when you talk to people. Go deeper than that, and not everyone does go deeper than that. If there just are no basic commitments that you have in your life, then don't be surprised if the overall course of your life is a bit more jagged than it might otherwise have been. Having a fundamental guiding framework doesn't guarantee that you'll always live according to it. I don't, and I don't know that there is anyone who does perfectly, but try to figure out what it is, or perhaps what it should be, because then you don't have to start from the ground up every time you have to think about where your values place you on an issue, or what sort of decision you should make, or what sort of considerations should matter to you. If you have a basic view of the world, a basic understanding of reality, a basic approach to truth, those questions don't all answer themselves. You still have to use your mind, but you've laid so much of the groundwork, and hopefully, and I hope this is the case for me, there's going to be an underlying consistency to the way that you think and the way that you act. Now, for a lot of people, that's a religious view on reality, but for you, maybe it's not. But think about what your big, deep, guiding take on reality is. And if you don't have one, then for what it's worth, I urge you to keep thinking about it, keep reading, keep listening, keep absorbing, because I do think it's really worth considering. Number 2, plan. Plan. I want to say that 50 times, but it would take up too much time. Some people think when they hear, oh, you really need to plan carefully, you need to plan well, and you need to plan all the time. They say, oh, look, That works for some people, but it's just not me. It's not my personality. I'm not a planner. That's not how I am. Don't buy that. Stop buying that. Stop telling yourself that. There are lots of things when it comes to good habits that we lack that are not the way that I am right now. You know, it's crazy to think that the way that you are right now should set the limits on the way that you live in the future. Okay, so you just don't want to improve? You don't want to make any progress in life? Don't be content with the way you are now. Get better. Dreams and goals are nice, but without a real-world plan, that is, having some understanding of the steps you need to take, the connections you're going to have to make, the tasks you have to complete, they'll only ever be dreams and goals. They're just wishes. They're nothing, right? You have to plan. This applies to big goals and small ones. So, buying a house, or getting into a particular career, or building a big workshop project, or arranging a holiday that you've always wanted to go on, starting a YouTube channel or a business, getting out of debt, getting in shape, writing a book, whatever it is, use checklists if you need to. I find lists incredibly helpful to refer back to see where you are in the process. You should have, and it's going to sound sometimes like I'm being really demanding because I think it's important, you should have an immediate and fully detailed answer to anyone who says to you, I want you to tell me the next 2 steps that you're going to take on your journey towards that goal. Right? You shouldn't have to pause and think about it. You should already know exactly what you're going to say in full. And if you don't, then you're not planning. It's not a real goal. You're not serious. It's just a wish. Number 3, be decisive. And by that I mean, treat your decision as made once you've made it. I don't mean you necessarily have to decide quickly, but once you've made your decision, know that it is made and think of it as made. The threshold for making an exception to this and revisiting a decision that you've already made should be very high. There should be a significant reason. Only do that if your circumstances have significantly changed. Did you accept the right job offer? You might think that. Did you pick the right meal from the menu? There were several houses that you were considering. Did you choose the right one? You made a decision about who to offer a job to. You made a decision to have a baby this year. That's a big one. Right, so these can be big or small. Well, here's a small one. You decided to use a particular piece of music in your video, and now you're lying in bed wondering if maybe that was the right one or if you need to redo it. Someone else just told you, perhaps, that they wouldn't have made the decision that you... Stop it. Right? You're using your brain when you do those things. You've done it. All right? It is done. You have decided. This is a habit that I think is so important. You've spent the time already, so don't waste your time and emotion, because that's what you're spending, going back and forth in case the decision that you made wasn't the ideal one. Because I'll tell you now, it wasn't the ideal one. Almost none of our decisions are the ideal one. Be comforted by that, right? Stop cluttering your mind with this pointless relitigation of decisions that you've already made, and move on to more useful thoughts and get on with your less than perfect but potentially still really wonderful life. Number 4, the halfway point is at the end of number 4. Number 4, reserve time. Don't try to find time. Now, what do I mean by that? I think you should never say, that sounds like a very forceful rule, but it's true. I think you should never say, I'll do that this weekend if I can find time. We'll see what happens. You'll see what happens? Don't passively wait to see what this external party called the weekend delivers you, right? The weekend doesn't control you. You should be controlling your weekend. you should already know what you're doing this weekend and what time is free. If you have time that isn't spoken for, then instead of saying to someone that you will do it if you can find time, book it in, or tell that person that you're not going to do it. Whatever you do, don't waste their time by letting them think that you might do it when in fact you won't. And if you book it in, then you have less free time, and you know that in advance. So you can say to yourself, okay, so the free time that I had is now only this big. If this sounds demanding, and it might sound like, gosh, this is really burdensome. I don't think it is burdensome, but if this sounds like I'm being too much of a dogmatist about that, I'm talking about the habits of effective people, right? Not necessarily people with lots of free time, or people who like to get hammered on Friday night and be a write-off for the rest of the weekend. Number 5, and these are in no particular order, by the way, or maybe the first one's most important, but generally they're not. Number 5, regularly do small amounts of something just because it makes you happy. Living an effective life is going to make you busier than most people. And you can construe that in a judgmental way about other people if you like, but I think it's the truth. If you're going to deliberately live an effective life, you're going to be much busier than most people. Being really busy, but also not doing anything for your own happiness, is bad for you. In a nutshell, it just is. So book out some of that time in your planning for yourself, and then it's not free anymore, and so you can't give it to anything or anyone else. It's spoken for, it's yours. Number 6, know what you're not good at. If you're not a good singer, then stop dreaming about being a great singer, or at least stop thinking about the possibility. We've all seen those episodes of American Idol where people learned that they can't sing. There are a few factors to weigh up when considering what to pursue, and what I am passionate about is only one of those things. Some skills can be learned, yes, that is true, such as some of the skills that I'm picking up in the workshop, for example, and there'll be different skills for you maybe, but look, for pity's sake, have some dignity and come to a sober assessment of your skills. For example, just because you're a religious person and you have opinions and you have an internet connection does not mean that you should have an apologetics ministry, whether it's a blog or a YouTube channel. I mean, I've read some of that stuff, and some of you are really pure cringe. Or, and this applies to everything, just because you feel strongly about politics, for example, and there are lots of people who fall into this trap. Just because you feel strongly about politics doesn't mean that you should present videos about politics or spend all day enlightening the world on Twitter, right? Passion is not expertise. And some people are so blind to that. They're like, oh, I know lots about this, when what they really mean is, I have lots of opinions about that. Really not the same thing. Or if there's a job that you would like to get into, but you have no expertise, no experience at it, then think about whether or not it's realistic for you to pursue that. You could save yourself a lot of misery. You could be pursuing something for years because you're so interested in it, but you're terrible at it. And it never comes to fruition, and you become hopelessly depressed because of that. You can save yourself all of that just by being realistic at the outset. So take into account what you're actually good at, or you could get good at through some training. I mean, don't just sit there and say, well, I'm not already good at it, so I won't try. You think, okay, is this something that I could learn? But I guess what I'm saying is, it's very wise to fit your plans around your gifts, or gifts that you could reasonably acquire through training. Seventhly, that seems grammatically correct, but I don't think we ever say that. Seventh, sleep. Get sleep. I've got a fairly small number of things that I'm really good at. Not a huge number, but I have a pretty good idea of what those things are. And sleep is one of those things, and I'm really happy about that. I hit the pillow I don't do anything else, like I'm not on my phone, because if I'm on my phone, that's not going to happen. But I get into bed, lie down, hit the pillow, and I drift off to sleep. And that's something I can do really well. But something that I'm not so good at is, while I'm good at sleeping, I do have a bad habit of staying up way too late, and I really should work on that habit. Do not be, whatever you do, don't be one of these people who's actually proud of being the workaholic who says, I get so much done and I get by on 5 hours sleep every night. Don't be a fool, man. You will, and in all literal seriousness, you will die young if that is how you live, right? It will kill you. Get some sleep. Lastly, eighth, and I can see that this one is the longest one. I think I got quite passionate about it as I was putting it together. I must have thought that it was important. Lastly, jealously guard your time and energy against theft. And you need to think of it as theft. You need to treat people who waste your time and energy like thieves, although in some ways they're worse than thieves. Thieves take things that you can be compensated for, or things that you can potentially get back. People who steal your time are taking away from you something that you could never retrieve from them. People who try to snag you in that pointless argument on the internet. People who drag out communication via drawn out emails and poorly worded messages, numerous messages, or meetings, even worse, when it is plain to you or to any thinking person, I think, that one short, clear conversation that they've thought about in advance, so they've invested in it so that you don't have to do their thinking for them, would suffice. And I'm sure that you know someone like that, possibly in your workplace. That tends to be where we bump into them. People who make appointments with you and then, through their own negligence, perhaps, their own mismanagement, they make that meeting pointless or redundant, but they don't tell you that. Anyone who leads you on about an opportunity that they're making you jump through hoops for, when all along they knew that it wasn't going to happen, or job application processes that require more than 2 in-person meetings. People who make plans with you but who don't respect you enough to tell you as soon as those plans change on their end, so that you're now in a situation where you're still planning for it but they're not, and so on. You're going to seem bristly, you're going to seem disagreeable, but do this. Make it very clear to those people that that is not acceptable. Make it clear that you don't want any of that. Make it clear that they ought not to have done that. If it's up to you, and this is where it can become confrontational, but still I think the right thing to do, if it is up to you, and it might not be up to you, this depends on the power differences between you and the other people, but if it is up to you, put a stop to it. End your involvement in that situation right away, even if the other people involved find that abrupt. Pull out of the application process if you can afford to do that. Decline to make future plans with that person, depending on your relationship with them, if it's not a vital relationship in your life. Don't reschedule with that person about a business opportunity. If you're out there on one of those dating apps, unmatch from that person straight away, even if they're cute, because chances are they're relying on their cuteness so that they can treat people with this kind of disrespect and get away with it. It is appropriate to have a certain kind of contempt for people who steal from you like this. You need to respect yourself. Cut the wasting off brutally and abruptly, as quickly as possible, as soon as you see it happening, and don't apologize for doing it. The reality is those people should be apologizing to you, but good luck with that. And that's it. That's my list of 8. These habits, and they're mostly not very deep and philosophical. I've got plenty of thoughts about deep and philosophical stuff, and some of those anyway, lurk behind point 1 about having your basic commitments sorted. But all of the rest of these are very practical. They're tasks, they're acts, they're things that you do. They're certainly task-oriented anyway. And they're all about practical effectiveness And they're all about also having a mind that I think is better equipped for effectiveness. That's what I was thinking about when I put these habits together, and I thought about whether or not they belong on the list. There are other habits, right? I'm not being exhaustive, so I haven't said much about being physically healthy or getting help when you need it, both of which, of course, really matter. I haven't talked about praying, even though that's actually very important to me, but it might not be important to you, and I'm trying to at least somewhat be relatable. But when I thought about myself and my own effectiveness in practical terms, achieving good things, progressing towards goals, realizing potentialities, blocking out things that inhibit you, these were the first 8 that I came up with. And I've had some years to reflect on them since writing this list. And I've shared them with some friends and got feedback to see what they think about it. And I still think they're very good. I do. And any of the successes that I've had in my adult life so far, hopefully there's plenty more adult life to come, have involved these habits, and I think I'm getting better at them. So I think these habits seem pretty universal. That's what I think. I think that they would apply to the lives of any functional people who want to do well. But of course, you've lived a different life from me. There are lots of things that you've done that I haven't, and vice versa. And there may have been other habits that were more relevant for you that aren't so relevant for me. And if so, I think it's worthwhile. In fact, I think it's important to reflect on what they are and how they might serve you in future. For what it's worth.